When we started this podcast, it seemed like we had to figure it all out on our own. Scripts, setup, filming schedule, logos. It was super overwhelming, and every day seemed to introduce a new decision that needed an answer. When you're starting off with something new, it seems like your to-do list keeps growing every day with new tasks, and that list can easily begin to overrun your life. Finding the right tool that not only helps you out, but simplifies everything can be such a game changer. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names like Allbirds and Gymshark to brands just getting started. Get started with your own design studio. With hundreds of ready-to-use templates, Shopify helps you build a beautiful online store to match your brand's style. Accelerate your content creation. Shopify is packed with helpful AI tools that write product descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your product photography. Get the word out like you have a marketing team behind you. Easily create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. And best yet, Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to international shipping to processing returns and beyond. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/ranks. Go to shopify.com/ranks. That's shopify.com/ranks.
Ready for a healthy, stress-free back-to-school season? Thrive Market's got your back with easy, high-protein meals, brain-boosting lunchbox staples, and low-sugar snack packs. Everything to simplify your busy mornings. Their groceries are high quality and no junk. Over 1,000 sketchy ingredients restricted and all trusted by parents so you can shop worry-free. Plus, their big back-to-school sale makes it the perfect time to stock up. Go to thrivemarket.com/podcast for 30% off your first order and a free $60 gift.
Hello, this is international football commentator Derek Ray, and you're listening to the Ranks FC podcast.
Hello, Rank Squad, and welcome to Ranks FC. It's your favourite transatlantic football podcast. My name's Jack Collins, and I'll be your host today. And joining me across the water, all the way from San Diego, it's Mr. Dean Jones. How you doing, mate?
Oh, I'm good, mate. Here we go. Another new season. I wonder how many not Premier League seasons. I wonder how many full football seasons I've now actually got in the memory bank. The full Premier League, hopefully, you'd like to believe, seeing as I'm so old. But yeah, I reckon I could go back to mid-90s, I reckon.
I was going to say, those first Premier League seasons must be a bit hazy. You would have been 8.
Mid-90s to really solid. Obviously, the first Premier League season I do remember because it was such a big deal. I remember Brian Deane scoring the first ever goal, and it was against Man United for Sheffield United.
Right.
And I can remember listening to it on the radio at home. And yeah, that's what we did back then on the old wireless.
Everything black and white as well. That's all well.
Literally, yeah. My family just looked around. Everything was in black and white. I didn't see the full features of them until the late 90s. But yeah, so I can actually remember most of it. 94, 95, I reckon, is when my brain really starts to remember details. And there was a season when Man United won the league, and it was Cantona 1-0, Cantona 1-0, Cantona 1-0. I think that was 95 or 96 or something like that. So I remember details around that. But before that, it is a bit hazy. Before Man United won the Premier League that first year, that it was Leeds won the league and the Football League, and Liverpool were there was that title that Liverpool, you've probably seen on YouTube even that movie where Arsenal and Liverpool have the game that goes down to the wire to win the title.
Yeah, Mickey Thomas,
yeah. So I do have a small recollection of watching that around my grandparents' house. I can remember something about it, but do I really? I don't know. It's the one that really, really vague. So here we go. Anyway, my 426th season of watching football. Can't wait.
Yeah, I mean, this is our big Premier League preview. It's funny, actually, you say these kind of things because, like, I think you're absolutely right. There will be vague memories of those. Like, I have vague memories of the 1998 World Cup. I was like,
Right, yeah.
4. Like, so, like, but like, I have vague memories of those games. Now, whether that's just retrospective,
Exactly, yeah.
I watched it back later on, but like, as in, I remember John Collins scoring a penalty because I was like, that guy's got my name. Like, and that kind of thing. But like, I don't know if that was just watching it backwards or
Mate,
how it worked.
I'll be intrigued. I mean, obviously, like our listenership here on Ranks is like, some of them are pretty young. So there are people that, you know, struggling to remember the 2010 season, probably.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, I was
legit.
the other week and we were doing lots of different bits and we were just talking about something. Someone was like, what was the Invincibles? And I was like, oh no. I was like, I'm actually well old. Like, what was the, and it was like the Leeds fan at the time, we were doing like best players ever. They were talking about Mark Viduka. One of them was like, who's Mark Viduka? And I was like, nah, I might have to go. I might have to go. I might be too old for this game. But
yeah,
it's, you know, it's good. It's good to have memories as well.
Oh, mate. And look, let's get excited because, like, there's going to be some mad stuff coming up. New history will be written in the Premier League. We've got the potential of an amazing title race this season. The amount of money that's been added to squads that were already pretty insane. We're going to have a relegation battle of sorts. I mean, obviously,
I think we're going to have a real relegation scrap. So
I'm losing faith in the idea, but we'll obviously talk about that in a bit. And then there's a middling bunch that have all been pretty consistent that I'm no longer that sure of, which might bring the relegation fight to life. So, yeah, there's a lot to get stuck into. There's an incredible amount of good players in this league, and the Premier League has seen some huge stars land, and there will be more. But honestly, I think this is going to be a brilliant campaign.
Yeah, I actually agree. I'm really, really looking forward to this Premier League campaign. And you know that I'm not as Premier League dialed in as some other people, you know, where it's like this or nothing. I spread my kind of viewership along. And I will continue to do that. But I am particularly excited, I think, for this Premier League campaign, which I think could be really, really interesting. Okay, so just to lay this out, this is part 1 of this podcast where we're going to be talking about the title race and we're going to be talking about the European battle as well, who might nick that 5th Champions League spot, Europa League spots, and the Conference League. And then in part 2, which is going to come later on in the week, we're going to be talking about the promoted sides, the relegation battle, the teams that might be dropping off, and those mid-table disruptors who are looking to kick upwards in the table and potentially take on the might of those above. So that's how it's going to divide. 2 separate podcasts for you this week. But I think we should start with the title race. And I know that it's not necessarily the popular thing to do. Some people like to leave it to the end because some people turn off. Don't turn off.
Nah.
Don't turn off after we finish with this.
Go big. Let's go big.
There's fun stuff in here. We're going to open with the title race. And I would say this to you, before I ask you which order you think it's going to go in, my hunch, Dean, is that any one of these 4 sides, Liverpool, Chelsea, Manchester City and Arsenal, could win the title this year. And I wouldn't be stunned. Now, I think that the percentage chances of them all winning it are different. I don't think it's 25 each, right? Like, I think there are favourites and there are teams I think are more likely to win it. But I wouldn't be stunned at the end of the season if any of these 4 teams won the title.
Yeah, I think I'd be surprised if Chelsea won the title. But I take your point because it could be a little bit open. I think actually watching the Community Shield, watching the Community Shield has probably opened our eyes a little bit to the fact that hopefully, like, Liverpool don't win it at a canter, because for a neutral, like, that's not fun. And obviously, as I sit here right now, we've seen Arsenal improve their squad. We are waiting to discover whether Man City potentially go and sign someone like Rodrigo, which would really bring a new edge to the title race. So it's exciting. I mean, we can't really avoid the fact that in the last show of the Hot Takes, I obviously spoke about Arsenal winning the league. So we'll get stuck into that. But yeah, I do think that we have got a proper title race in our hands here. And as I say, watching Crystal Palace win the Community Shield just added a little layer to it and gives those teams some hope.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, look, it's only right to start with the champions, and they've obviously had a big old summer over at Anfield. It's been
Still going, mate. Still
summer
going.
for Liverpool, and it isn't over yet. Obviously, the Isak links refuse to go away, but Mark Gay being talked about today, which is be very, very interesting. A lot of Liverpool fans have been crying out for an extra centre back to make sure that looks secure. So it looks pretty good from a Liverpool perspective. They won the league, as you say, at a canter last year. But when it came to the summer, they decided they weren't going to stand still, sit on their laurels, consolidate and congratulate themselves. They decided they were going to go for broke. And so we've seen Florian Wirtz come through the door. We've seen Hugo Ekitike come through the door. We've seen Kerkez and Frimpong, new fullbacks, come through the door. And Liverpool look very, very strong, especially in those attacking areas, I think. And we started to see a little bit of those attacking patterns come to life in the first half of the Community Shield. It wasn't perfect. And look, let's not use that as the be-all and end-all barometer of where everyone's going to be. But I think if you'd said that Liverpool, or told a Liverpool fan that this was the summer they were going to have, and obviously Mamardashvili comes in as well. That was done last year, but he's now there and he's the backup to Alisson. That feels like a long-term succession plan. It looks pretty rosy, I think, in red.
Yeah, it should be rosy, shouldn't it? I mean, you look at the financial outlay. I mean, they've gone big on Bundesliga. They've gone big on Bundesliga. Wirtz, Ekitike and Frimpong, where most of their money's gone so far. Obviously, there's going to be at least something else still to come in this transfer window. And obviously, we are actually seeing this team start to transition and change now. When a year ago, nobody really predicted Liverpool to go and win the league, and it was because they were transitioning, obviously, from Jurgen Klopp in his final season. There were no major signings, and we didn't really understand how they'd be able to put themselves into a title race. Yet, Slot was very smart, wasn't he, in the way that he just slightly evolved areas of the team, changed the positional sense of somebody like Ryan Gravenberch to give them something a bit different in the centre of the park. They wanted that extra control in their build-up play, and they managed to do it. And obviously Alexander-Arnold was really pivotal too in the way that he changed his positioning and actually was extremely hard to manage from an opposition perspective. So there were all those factors that were intriguing. But this season, because they've made such significant signings, we're going to see a different version of Liverpool, a different type of team, a different format. And the expectations are higher. So there's that. And we've also got to wonder, and this will be a huge factor as to whether they do actually win the league again, as to are Van Dijk and Salah going to show signs of decline? Like, that will be pivotal. Now, given their age, it's got to happen soon. I'm not saying it's going to be drastic, fall off a cliff moment, and suddenly Salah never scores another penalty and Van Dijk gives away a penalty every game. But obviously, the Community Shield gave us those narratives to at least start to consider. And it's plausible that Van Dijk and Salah begin to see their powers wane. And so if that does happen, then those new signings have to be they have to hit the ground running. And it makes the need for somebody like Mark Gahey in defence more important, I believe. And it just makes you wonder. Look, for the first however long of that Community Shield, like some of the football that Liverpool played was just ridiculous. Like how fast that ball was moving was like crazy. So we're going to see them play insane football. But will it lead to title-winning football? I don't know necessarily.
I think what's really interesting is seeing how this team develops in terms of, the point of attack, if you will, right? Because so much of the creativity came from Trent, and that was in like a really unique role that he kind of carved out for himself. That onus, should we say, of creativity now moves further up the field. It moves to Florian Wirtz. And one of the things about Florian Wirtz is how effective he is in the final third, right? Like we've seen that for Leverkusen over the last couple of years. We've seen it for Germany as well, using that kind of dual role with Jamal Musiala. He likes to be in and around those areas. If he's going to be the creative point, is he going to be dropping deeper? Is he going to be kind of playing in a slightly different role to what we saw at Leverkusen? Now, I think that those transitions, and one of the things he has in his locker that I think makes him really special, is he kind of doesn't wait for other players to kind of pick up the tempo. It's not like he needs everyone to be on the same wavelength. He can do that on his own, kind of matches it and then raises it, and people come to him. And I think that's a really special thing in the game. But also moving that point of attack is an interesting thing for any side, right? Like, because when you're talking about Liverpool in this way, it's going to look very different to what it looked like, last season with it coming from deep. What I like about them is that they have the ability to work through the thirds. They have the ability to go long in different ways. And now with two flying fullbacks as well, I do think that they're going to be quite irresistible at times. I think there are going to be a lot of games where Liverpool rack up a lot of goals. I do feel like they are going to be slightly more defensively inconsistent, perhaps, and that they will have goals scored against them. Now, the 2-2 in the Community Shield kind of speaks to this a little bit, but I think that we might see a lot of 4-3s with Liverpool, especially if they are going with a 4 in attack that includes Wirtz in the number 10 role. He obviously works incredibly hard, but it's not the same as having a Szoboszlai playing as the kind of most attacking point of a midfield 3. So what this looks like, and whether, I've said this kind of from the start, if they were going to go into this and go, look, if Isak joins or Isak doesn't join, I don't think it makes a huge amount of difference, but I think this even further top heavies them if he does come through the door. Do they need a player who's going to kind of sit in there next to Gravenberch in bigger games in order that they don't get overwhelmed, especially if Kerkez and Frimpong are flying forward? Now, you might point out to the fact that Conor Bradley can play in a slightly more defensive manner when he plays at a right back to what we've seen from Jeremy Frimpong down the years. But I do think it's going to be interesting just to see how the balance strikes for Liverpool. And I think it would also be remiss to mention, obviously, we've spoken about the incredibly tragic loss of Diogo Jota. That's a complete intangible. And I don't want to kind of relegate it to football terms because it's so much more of a personal tragedy than that. But how the players deal with the fact that they have lost not only a teammate, but one of their good friends, someone who was around the camp constantly, someone who was clearly very, very well liked, is something you can't kind of put your finger on. Now, it could end up being the galvanizing force that ends up, with Liverpool winning everything and it all being this incredible tribute to an incredible man and an incredible footballer. But equally, we don't know what that kind of impact is going to look like until we see it throughout the season.
Yeah, I mean, look, Jota was such an important figure on the pitch for Liverpool in terms of their style of play, whether he was starting a game or coming off the bench. Like, the amount of energy that he showed and the understanding of what they were trying to carry out was like, it was a huge part of what they had built last season. Yeah, obviously it's impossible to directly replace, and there will be a sense of longing for that because it's going to be so emotional around particularly these first games without him at Anfield. But Liverpool have got a big task here because we are celebrating them as a great team from last season. They are the champions. They've got a title to defend, and they haven't won consecutive league titles since 1984. Like, I'm talking there at the start of the show about things I don't remember in football, and I can confirm I don't remember that.
Barely born, I would say.
Yeah, I was in this world, but definitely wasn't watching Liverpool win back-to-back titles. But
no,
we've all heard about it.
I was a good decade off yet.
Yeah, you're a star in the sky, my friend, watching down. So I think they have a good chance of doing that for the first time in all those years. 40 years, whatever, 42 years it'll be by the time we get to that moment. But they're not going to have it all their way. They've got to play in a different way. And these new signings have a level of expectation to live up to, and no gelling in time, because they are the marker of success and they are the team that everybody wants to beat. So they have to be on their top game from game one.
Yeah, I mean, and look, it takes us quite nicely onto Arsenal, who obviously you said last week you think are going to have enough to get over the line this time round. And maybe that's the big difference between the two sides, is that when you look at the Arsenal lineup, there's going to be a lot which is familiar, right? From last season, it's going to be quite a lot of the time the same back five, you would imagine. Obviously, there's a little bit of a debate who plays a right back and left back, but it's going to be around the same kind of personnel. We don't think that Christian Mosquera is going to play all that much this season. He'll be used as a utility defender, I think, and utilised in the cups and given that kind of soft landing pad. But we know kind of how Arsenal are generally going to line up from a defensive perspective. In the middle, Zubamendi comes in, as the number 6. He's going to be the player that plays in there next to Declan Rice. I think we'll see them more as kind of a double pivot at times this season. Gives them a little bit more of a stable base, or at least that's what we've seen in the pre-season friendlies, I think, which is an interesting little changeover. Martin Odegaard comes back in here. Bukayo Saka is going to be, on the right-hand side. As it stands, it looks like Gabriel Martinelli starts the season as the left winger. And obviously Victor Gyökeres comes in up front, and that's going to be a change in that regard. But he's going to have Kai Havertz snapping at his heels. And I don't think Havertz is going to be particularly pleased about not being a starting player in this Arsenal side. We saw him score a brilliant goal, getting in behind, holding off a defender, slotting home. I think he's going to be banging on that door to make sure that he is not forgotten and he is still part of this team. I wonder if there are games where we see them utilised together with perhaps Gyökeres off the left-hand side a little bit more. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how Arteta deals with that. But from a kind of revolution at Liverpool, especially in the attacking kind of thirds of the pitch, it's more kind of evolution at Arsenal. And that might give them an edge at the start of the season, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, look, they had the best defence in the league last season, which is a great building platform and something that there's no reason to believe needs to change. Like, they should be able to remain as resolute as ever. Their problem was goals. They didn't score enough. And they obviously were missing Saka for key stages. Odegaard was missing for a while too. They didn't have an out-and-out reliable goal scorer. But they fixed that. They've signed Gyökeres. The lad's a monster, right? This is a Haaland-type striker. He's not as good as Haaland, right? But in his determination, in his fierceness, in the complexities of the way that he likes to score goals and can score goals, they've got themselves a goal monster. So he can give them that uplift of 20 to 30 goals that they need. Whether he scores them all or whether he's just such a nuisance that they end up just scoring that many more goals, we'll have to wait to see. But if Saka stays fit and they've got Gyökeres, I still think they're slightly light on the left because Martinelli nor Trossard are quite up to the level of those two, in my opinion. And they've obviously have tried and looked into doing that. They've got Odegaard. They've got other players competing as the new number 10. And they've also got Zubamendi, mate, who's going to bring something special to this team.
He's so good.
I spoke to someone the other day.
It's going underneath the radar how good Martin Zubamendi is.
I think so. And in fact, it got under my radar. And I spoke to my brother-in-law the other day, Arsenal fan, went to the Emirates, and I sent him a couple of messages asking about Gyökeres, what did he look like in person? And he never actually replied to that question because all he spoke about was Zubamendi. He was like, mate, I was quite literally purring watching Zubamendi play football. He was like, he's just giving us something that is different level. It's like, the way that he was passing it out to Saka was insane. He's picking the ball up as a sweeper behind Gabriel and Saliba, and he's just spraying the ball about with like inch perfect moments. It's like they didn't even really like desperately need that, but they've now got that as well. And so I think when you consider that, like, the goals problem should be fixed, and like it has to be fixed. The only way that they can win the title is to make up the goal shortage that they had. And I do feel like they were a bit unlucky in that sense last season because there were times when, they're relying on Marino as your centre forward and things like that. But they've changed the squad. Obviously, Noni Madueke has been brought in as well. Like, shouldn't ignore that because I think Madueke will actually play a bigger role in this season. He's a better signing that he's getting credit for. And maybe even I realised initially, like, the more I speak to people and think about what Madueke is going to do, I do actually think that that's going to be a good signing. But, mate, on paper, this team is so good. So good. In fact, since the Invincibles, the best squad they've had. This squad is right up there. And now it's going to be about consistency, keeping these players fit, and have they got their mentality right at the end to get over the line? They've got everything else that they could possibly need. And I don't think there are any excuses for Arteta not getting the job done, because obviously that's going to depend on how good Liverpool are, how good Man City are, and that's tough. But to at least be right there until the final weeks of this season.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Like when you kind of look at it from Arsenal's perspective, the only weakness that I see in this squad is at left wing. Like, and I do think that's the place where it could be really interesting. Now, if Calafiori is playing at left back and he's kind of going in there, he's marauding up the pitch, he's doing the things that we kind of expect from him, then maybe that opens up that left flank a little bit more. Maybe it means that things look a little bit different in terms of how the space is operated, because Arsenal needs something off that left-hand side, because otherwise everyone is going to double mark them all the way down the stretch in terms of what they're putting together on that right-hand side, which we know is such a dangerous weapon that they have in their, okay, if you really excuse the pun, Arsenal. But, you kind of look at it in terms of where they're at everywhere else. Like, I know that Arsenal fans were like, Eze, and I know there's a kind of draw of him being an Arsenal fan, etc. Do they need another number 10? I don't know. Not if you really think that Ethan Nwaneri is as good as Arsenal fans are expecting him to be. We know that Max Dowman is someone who's made waves in preseason. Now, am I expecting 15-year-old Max Dowman to be a key part of Arsenal's year? Not really, no. Although I think that they will give him opportunities. But if you want there to be pathways for Nwaneri, for Dowman, maybe you don't go and buy a number 10. Now, I know Eze can play off the left as well, but do you want someone like a Rodrigo? Could you make that happen in this kind of situation in order to open up doors and really push yourselves into a place where you're like, yeah, we should be going into this as favourites? That's where I think it's interesting. And I think from that Arsenal perspective, like where they're at and where they, kind of expect to be at, it feels like they're right in the conversation. And look, if that stability proves to be the thing that ticks over and Liverpool do feel a little bit all over the place, it takes a little while for the new signings to gel in the same way, then maybe that opens the door from an Arsenal perspective for them to actually get over the line.
Yeah, I just honestly think, mate, that we're tossing a coin here. I don't think there is much margin between Liverpool and Arsenal as we go into the season. Like, it's a guessing game because we're giving Liverpool the perspective of being the champions and we're giving them the benefit of doubt that, they don't lose to teams like Crystal Palace early stages of the season and that Salah and Van Dijk aren't falling off a cliff. But we're also balancing that out with the fact that Arsenal were really, really good last season. For spells, they were actually the best team in the league. Emptying stadiums wherever they go and all that sort of stuff. And when they were good and when they were scoring, it was all very, very good. But there was those marginal games where they couldn't find that breakthrough, where they couldn't find those moments, where they had a key player or two missing and it cost them. But that's what this transfer window has been all about fixing. And that's why I honestly think it's barely anything between them. And I'm giving Arsenal a big chance to go and win the league.
Yeah, I mean, look, talking of teams who had really good spells last year, we obviously know that the start of the season was dreadful from a City perspective. But no one picked up more points in 2025 than Manchester City. In a really, really down year, in one of their worst years in recent history, they finished 13 points behind Liverpool. Now, that feels like a lot of points, and it is a lot of points. But equally, that was an entire season sans Rodri, who, as we talk about quite a lot, is a unicorn, right? And can do things that the very few players can do. Now, he's going to miss the start of this season, but City have augmented this squad in a really interesting way. Now, perhaps Pep's most interesting signing is his assistant manager in bringing in Pep Lijnders, right? And potentially being a little bit more direct, potentially being a little bit more vertical, having carriers in the team. And suddenly you bring in Tijani Reinders, you bring in Ryan Shirky, players who we know can carry the ball in these areas. And I think that in all of the chat and all of the kind of excitement about this Liverpool side with all of the new players that have come in and the talent that's arrived at Anfield, in the discussion around Arsenal, trying to get from second to first and bring in Gyökeres and having all of these kind of different elements of trying to push that over the line, City have potentially been forgotten about a little bit. And I do think that it would be unwise to sleep on a Pep Guardiola side who feel like they've had a break, they're going to have this refresh, and they're going to come back into this with a vengeance, especially if Pep sees this as a potential kind of, when I do this one more time, I'm going to walk away. I find it intriguing that nobody is really talking about City in the title race, and I would not be counting them out at this point.
Yeah, I'm definitely not counting them out. That would be dumb. They've got Erling Haaland who could score on his own 50 goals if he was to really, really fire it up. But if we just question why Man City dropped off and whether they can get back to those insane levels from before last season, I think we have to consider a few things. Obviously, like, there were injuries, and the Rodri one is a hugely significant one. But also, it was a team that was probably a bit older, probably a bit more tired last season than the ones that had come before and the 4 seasons before that. And I think they paid the price of that, particularly in transitions and in combat moments, and they were overpowered. So I think that cost them. But more than that, Pep had lost some of his power in the Prem. Since he came here, he's decided how we're all playing football. And last season, that started to turn a bit. We've talked on this pod for a few months now about how we think there's going to be more chaos coming to the league, right? We think teams are going to try different things. 2 up top, 4 up top, crosses coming in more regularly. That doesn't suit Pep Guardiola football. He doesn't want any chaos. He likes to be, he likes to be in control of everything, right? And that includes how the other team's going to play, not just how his own team plays. He wants to run how the league is played. We've seen it happen, down to League 2. You're seeing people play out the back like Man City have been doing. Can it still work, Jack? I think that's the big question for him. Like, has he got to come up with something new, inventive, surprising, that unlocks a new element of Man City for next season that nobody really sees coming? I mean, obviously, like, in terms of big absences, De Bruyne and Kyle Walker have gone. Well, that's good news, I think, for Man City. Like, they were at the end of their days in a City shirt, and it had to happen. He's tried to bring in some verve in Cherki, in Reinders, in Aït-Nouri, and so that they should have a bit more energy. But do you think he'll be able to deal still with the fact that people have identified last season what they don't like it up them, as they used to say, Jack, and they're going to get that a lot, right?
I think this is the season that Pep embraces the chaos.
He hates chaos. He hates it.
I think you look at the signings. He's bringing in ball carriers. He's bringing in players that are able to work in transition. He brings in Klopp's old assistant to become his assistant. For so many years, it's been Juan Malillo and Enzo Maresca. And instead now it's Pep Lijnders, one of the architects of kind of like rock and roll football at Liverpool, in those incredibly, vivacious, verve-driven Klopp teams that brought the best out of Klopp, brought the best out of Pep at times. And I think that we're seeing maybe a slight kind of nod of acceptance to the fact that he's going to have to adapt and evolve again. And I never, ever, ever will doubt Pep Guardiola's ability to evolve, because I think we've seen it time and time again. And I don't mean that, it's necessarily been, everything has changed and Pep's playing 4-4-2 and slinging crosses into Chris Wood, right? Like that's not what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is that I think that Pep's teams are going to become more vertical. We're going to see flying fullbacks holding the width again. We're going to see number 10s across the line behind Erling Haaland in terms of creation. I think we're going to see a very different City. Now, some of this does rely on the fact that Rodri gets back to his best, but I think they've made a kind of conscious effort to be less reliant on him. I thought it was interesting watching them in the game against Palermo at the weekend. And look, I know, pre-season friendly, pinch of salt, all of that, but seeing Nico O'Reilly and Nico Gonzalez next to each other as a shield and be like, whoa, okay. And then Reinders comes on and they become a little bit like more susceptible to counterattacks. They look like they're opening up a few more gaps, but you've got Tijani Reinders running behind Erling Haaland. You've got him picking up cutbacks on the edge of the box. He feels like a more athletic version of Dortmund Ilkay Gundogan. And I'm like, wow, okay. Can you pair that? Can you pair that with someone who's going to be able to sit at the base? And look, if Rodri's out for a while, I'd imagine Pep maybe is a little bit more cautious at the start and they unleash them in different ways. But if you can get that with someone alongside Rodri come September, wow, I think there's something very, very special cooking there as well. Like I'm intrigued by Manchester City.
But you're depending there on Rodri coming back in September. That's the worry. What if he's not? What if he goes missing again? They haven't still got that backup.
Well, I think Reinders can play at the base. And I think he's able to make things work, make things tick in a way that Rodri can. He's not as good defensively. No. And therefore, you have to pair him with someone like a Nico Gonzalez or a Nico O'Reilly because you get that little bit extra in terms of bodies in the midfield. I take that. But I don't think that it's going to be anywhere near as chaotic as it was last year at Man City, because I feel like they have more options in order to change things around now if things are not going their way. And look, that might not mean that they win it. And again, I have Arsenal and Liverpool ahead of them in terms of where I have the kind of league table panned out in my head. But I think that people are sleeping on the fact that they were genuinely quite good in 2025. Genuinely after the turn of the year, they were pretty solid. They weren't brilliant, but they got the job done. They picked up more points than anybody else. Okay, Liverpool took their foot off the gas, fine. But like when you're actually putting it in that context, I do think that it's unwise to look at City and be like, no chance they challenge.
No, I mean, I do think they're starting off the season in a weaker spot, though, than the other two. And I do have doubts about whether they've got enough all over the pitch, to be honest, because even in the attacking sense, we've seen they've let Grealish go. McAtee wasn't getting any promises, so he's going to go. Savinho is obviously being chased by Tottenham right now. So there's a lack of... I can't be sure of what's coming in that attacking sense. But obviously, if they go and sign Rodrigo, then that changes a lot. And that would, for me, put them back into that conversation of actually winning the league. I'm expecting a much better season for them. Going back to what you said at the start, though, they only finished, 13 points off of Liverpool. We do have to remember that Liverpool did take their foot off the pedal. Once that title was secure, Liverpool's points tally from last season doesn't really reflect how dominant they were and could have been if they'd really gone for it at the end.
Yeah, okay, fair. No, I take that. I mean, look, there's one more team to put into this conversation, and I know that you're not quite as sold on them as I am, but I think that it would be remiss to leave Chelsea out of this discussion, because I think that in terms of squad depth, in terms of what we've seen from them in the last sort of 3 months, and again, pre-season, pinches of salt, but this squad is right up there in terms of talent and ability. And we will now see what it is and what Chelsea have in the locker, because, we don't know exactly how things are going to pan out in terms of the defensive positions. If they need reinforcements at centre-back, I think they do. And we've already talked plenty of times about the fact that neither of us are convinced that Robert Sanchez is a Premier League challenging goalkeeper. And so do they need to bring someone in that conversation potentially? But elsewhere on this pitch, I think that Chelsea are as good as almost anybody else across the board.
Yeah, I mean, defensively, I would have my biggest concern, like the goalkeeper and the centre-back positions. If neither of those spots are filled by deadline day, then I think that they are inferior to their rivals in terms of going for a title. So I would have to be concerned about that. But they play incredibly attractive football. They have been building this now for an amount of time whereby the pieces have fallen into place and we're finally able to see what they were aiming for. It was all over the place, wasn't it, for a while, what Chelsea were doing. They're still going to keep buying new players. They're still going to try and sign the likes of Garnacho, and nobody really knows why. But Enzo Maresca has the job of bringing this all together. And it's do or die, really, for him. If this doesn't work, I don't think he will get through this season at Chelsea if they're not in the title race, to be honest. Like, I think that there's that much pressure on him to do well. Some Chelsea fans won't agree with that, for sure. But I think that for Maresca, this is a huge task ahead, and that he's got to show he's up for it. Look, they're champions of the world, right? They are Conference League winners. They put together a spell of results that saw them sneak into the Champions League places in the Premier League last season. So they have had the components, and the evidence has been there to show that Maresca can bring it all together. And now that he's moved on he is still moving on deadwood, but Joao Felix is gone and Dewsbury Hall's found a new home and Madueke's been allowed to go, and they've got in Joao Pedro and Jamie Gittins and Hatto and Delap and Esteval's here now. So they've got all these exciting new configurations of their team setup. But is it going to work? Like, they're going to have a lot of attacking options. They've got a lot of players who are still inexperienced in the sense of winning titles. And for me, that's going to leave them short. So I think we're going to see a very good Chelsea team this season. I can't see them being able to go game for game for game for the next 10 months and see off Liverpool or Arsenal as we sit here right now.
Yeah, I mean, look, last week I sat here and I gave you my lukewarm, in inverted commas, take that I think that Chelsea will do really well against the biggest teams and might struggle, to drop points again in silly games, almost like Arsenal-y from last year, right? Like that's the bit that I'm kind of unconvinced by, and maybe it's about mentality as much as anything else. You're looking at this team and being like, right, who's stepping up when things are really rough? Who are the leaders in this team when things do, as they inevitably will at some point in the season, go wrong? Is that something that could cause a spiral? We saw them spiral last year in terms of having a couple of bad results and then not being able to claw it back until sort of March time. It was a 2-3 month spiral that Chelsea went down. Have they brought in the leadership that's going to, or have those players evolved? It doesn't need to be brought in. Actually, that's a really unfair point. Has that leadership evolved within the squad to be able to deal with something like that now? I don't know if that's the case, and that's for me is the big thing. Look, I think this is a really interesting title race because I think that everyone is a little bit flawed, right? Like there is an element of, we talked about that left wing spot for Arsenal. Are they going to be able to actually create enough that means that they don't get locked down on that right-hand side? We talked about Liverpool's balance at the base of the midfield. We talk about City there, and is Rodri potentially being absent for parts of it? Is he going to get back up to full speed straight away? What does that leave City like? Are they going to be able to deal with the chaos? There's something in each of these teams. And I think Chelsea's is mentality. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens when in those periods where they go behind or they concede a silly goal. Who's the people stepping up and being like, right, okay, pull this together. We've got this. That I think for me is the question mark over Chelsea. I don't really have it over the talent in the squad.
Yeah. I just think they've got so much ground to make up. And I don't know that they've moved the needle far enough in this transfer. I like their signings. I prefer them to other stuff they've been doing in past summers. But have they really gone from being 15 points off of the pace in a league, as I say, where Liverpool had actually taken their foot off the pedal by then anyway, they were far superior, to being able to make up that ground and beyond? I don't think they have. I really don't think they have. And there's no signs. They would need both Arsenal and Liverpool to fall off from where they were last season. Chelsea lost 9 games last season, whereas the two at the top lost 4, right? You can usually, at a push, maybe lose 5 games to go and win the title, right? That's typically what we see. Like even 5 can prove to be too many. So Chelsea have got to halve the amount of games they lose. And I don't think they can do that, mate, to be totally honest. I don't think you look at that Chelsea team right now, particularly now that they've lost Levi Colwill, and they're struggling a little bit for centre-back options, and their goalkeeper's not at the level of the others. I don't think they've got the same fear factor, even though they have just gone and they were brilliant in the Club World Cup, right? They surprised me. They played some really good football. But I'm not expecting them to play that way exactly in the same manner again. There was no pressure on them in that tournament, apart from internally. It was a motivation of money, ultimately, that tournament. Like, it was a huge amount of money up for grabs, and surprise, surprise, Chelsea rose to it. But I think it was good for them to keep winning. Like, on the back of winning a European trophy, they've gone and won that trophy. So there's a winning habit going on here. I don't know, man. I just don't think that Chelsea have got it right now to win this title race. So I would still expect them to be 3rd or 4th.
Yeah, fair. I mean, look, I think they get 80 plus, and that was something kind of posited to us by one of our Patreons, Darius. I think he's probably right. I think they get 80 plus. Whether that's enough to go and win the title, my hunch is that you're going to need 90 plus to win the title in this race. But I think Chelsea are in that 80 plus category. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see.
I don't know, mate. 80 plus is a lot. Like, Arsenal only got 74 points last season.
I reckon they pick up 11 points on where they were last year, like quite easily.
I don't know, mate. They still won 20 games. Like, it wasn't necessarily that was the factor. I don't know.
Okay.
I like your optimism for them, but
I mean, look,
I'm very unconvinced that they can make that much of a jump given what the other teams have done this summer.
Okay, alrighty. Right, we'll take a break there. When we come back, let's have a little look at the European battle. Who's going to get that 5th Champions League spot, which we assume is going to be staying in the Premier League for next season, and also the Europa and Conference League battles as well. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Ranks FC and the first part of our Premier League predictions, the first episode of 2. We'll be having another one later in the week where we talk about the relegation battle, the promoted teams, and also those teams who are in mid-table who are trying to claw their way out of that and up into the upper echelons of the Premier League. That's going to come later in the week, but there's just too much to get through to do it all in one episode. Just before we move on with that, a little plug for a new podcast that's launching. It's called First Up Football. It opened this week. It's a daily show that comes out 10 minutes at the start of the show. You might remember that I was part of a project for Men in Blazers called Early Kickoff that took place over the years. That was canned in the summer, but we've basically decided to resurrect it as an independent project. First Up Football, where 10 minutes at the start of every day for the US and UK. It's on YouTube and all videoed now as well, where we're basically trying to bring you all of the headlines from the football world in 10 minutes at the start of your day. So would really, really appreciate if you gave that a look, give us a listen and see if it's something you could add into your daily schedule. There'll be a link to it in the description of this podcast. Then let's get to this European race. I think it's really interesting seeing where everybody is at this point. I kind of have a few teams pegged in here. I was kind of sort of trying to do the top 10 in some ways. And so obviously we have to have a conversation about Manchester United and Tottenham Hotspur. Can they kind of work their way back up into this European conversation? We'll have to talk about Aston Villa and Newcastle United. Obviously, Newcastle in the Champions League, Aston Villa in the Europa League. Can they push on to try and claim that back? Brighton, without European football, I think are a really, really interesting prospect this time round under Fabian Hertzler, and the way that they've gone about their business this summer, very Brighton in many ways, but I'm very hot on where they are right now. And then Nottingham Forest as well, who are going to be playing in the Europa League after the CAS decision has meant that the Crystal Palace have dropped to the Conference League. A lot of very angry Palace fans about this. And I tell you what, I feel your pain a little bit. And as much as Forest were lots of fun to watch last year, the idea of watching your club being thrown out of a competition for breaching multi-club ownership rules and being replaced by Nottingham Forest, who would never, ever, 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 ever do anything regarding multi-club ownership. That would never gone anywhere near them, never had anything to do with it, would make me quite cross. So I feel Palace fans' pain on this one. But I think there's some really interesting candidates here, Dean. Obviously, we've got that 5th Champions League spot that we assume is going to remain in the Premier League. I mean, there will be a lot of clubs desperate to pick up that 5th spot. We know that it's been a difficult summer for Newcastle United. It's been a strange summer at Aston Villa. I think probably we'll start with Newcastle, seeing as they are the incumbents.
Yeah, I mean, I don't give Newcastle hope in hell, actually, of making 5th spot as we sit here right now. Disastrous transfer window. They're on the verge of still losing Alex Isak, despite the messages that they're trying to put out that he won't be leaving. He probably will. And if he does leave, you've got there's a big boots to fill. And I don't know if they'll manage to do it. The idea would be that if Isak is going to go, then certainly somebody would have to be through the door first, so they're not scrambling around. But even beyond that, I think Newcastle are going to find it difficult. Now, look, it's a shame because there was so much optimism building into this summer. How good were they last season? Do you know what I mean? Like, were you that convinced of Newcastle last season that they were a team that were worthy of making the Champions League places? Because
well, they started really badly, right? And then obviously it kind of worked itself out in the December. Actually, worked itself out is very harsh. Eddie Howe worked it out, right? And in terms of the way he played the midfield, and suddenly second half of the season, they were a very different prospect. But the most convincing side I've seen qualify in the last Champions League spot in the last 5 years? No. right? Like, I think that's fair to say. But the way that they were able to make it work and then obviously kick that through into the Carabao Cup in the final and winning that trophy, the first trophy in 60 odd years, it was a massive achievement for the club, right? And then to go and not dwell on that trophy too much, but actually to go out and make sure they grabbed that last Champions League spot on the final day. You know what? They did enough as far as I was concerned to do it. And obviously the table doesn't lie in many ways, but I thought the way that they were able to pull themselves back from such a poor start deserves major credit. And Eddie Howe deserves major credit for working that out and getting his team playing the way he wanted to.
Yeah, I just think that like when they did come good, it was quite heavily reliant on Isak pulling them through. He got, there was a period where his numbers were extremely good. And obviously it correlated with that.
By Isak, you mean Jacob Murphy, I assume?
I mean, he was, I'm not saying he didn't do it without help, but I still think that like Isak's presence and goal involvement throughout that period were important. There was that, they beat Arsenal, didn't they? November time. And that was kind of a turning point in terms of what they were capable of, and they started to go on a bit of a goal glut and stuff like that. But I just can't look past the fact that they haven't leveled up. Anthony Elanga's a fine signing. Aaron Ramsdale's a fine signing. If they get Johan Visser, that's a fine replacement for Callum Wilson. If they get Nicholas Jackson, say, as the Isak replacement, then that's fine. They're not getting any better. I don't think this team's getting any better right now. And that's why I can't have them finishing fifth.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with you in many ways. Like, I feel like this has been a disaster from start to finish. And like, much as it's been memed, etc., like, I do feel for Newcastle fans who must have thought that silverware and Champions League was the gateway opening, right, for them to really kick on and make things stick. And instead, it's proved a false dawn, right? Like, it's just year of the full spring for Newcastle United in terms of they see that happen and they're like, oh, it's almost like your eyes are deceiving you. They'll be like waking up, but I'm going to wake up from this bad dream in a minute that we just couldn't sign anyone and everyone kept turning us down, etc. And look, it's not, anyone in particular's fault. Like, in terms of the way that Newcastle have tried to structure it in terms of wages, etc., is relatively sensible, and they're being punished for that in terms of they can't offer the same wages that other people do. There's a reason that Alexander Isak is trying to leave, and I would suggest it's because he is not being paid the amount that he expects to be paid if he is a £150 million player, as Newcastle are valuing him and saying, well, you're valuing me there, then pay me the wages that a player who's worth that kind of money would worth. But that would break Newcastle's wage structure. And everyone else would be like, well, where's my wage? Where's my wage increase? Bruno Guimaraes has been like, hang on, if he's on that, I'm only surely going to be 50k a week behind. Like, I understand why Newcastle are struggling with sorting this out, especially in the kind of throes of PSR regulation, et cetera, fine. And look, you can debate whether that's good, bad, or indifferent till the cows come home. But I think we're all kind of on the page that whilst PSR is kind of there with the best of intentions, it's proved to be an inefficient and a system that doesn't work in terms of what it's trying to do. So what you're getting here is a Newcastle United who I think you're absolutely right. If Isak leaves, are fundamentally not as good as they were last year. But, you also have to look at it in a way of being like, can you diversify? Can you change this team up so it looks slightly different? So the reliance on Isak isn't there to the same extent. I neither am convinced by Anthony Elanga, but I do think that Johan Visser would be a good signing and someone that is just there and reliable and chips in with the sort of 10, 12 goals that Newcastle United need from a player like that. So I think that there is probably a strategy here that if you do get 140, 150 million through the door for Isak, you can invest it wisely in order to make this team more multifaceted, more able to do different things rather than being a very good but slightly one-dimensional outfit. So there's possibility that Newcastle spend this money well and they bring in the right players, and actually under Eddie Howe, who's been, who's improved players left, right and centre at his time in Newcastle, are able to kick on again. But I think that the smart money would be that there's a slight regression from last season based on what we're looking at in front of us.
Yeah, I think we've got to be looking at other teams here to make that fifth spot. I've just a real lack of conviction for me in terms of going here.
Yeah, I mean, look, well, let's go to Aston Villa, who obviously finished just outside the Champions League places.
And play Newcastle on the opening day.
They do indeed. It's been a very quiet summer Villa Park. Now, Gesson came through the door last week, which did kind of calm people down a little bit from a Villa perspective. But it's been a bit of a case of consolidation rather than reintegration in many ways from Unai Emery and Aston Villa. Now, I'm sure there is frustration around the way that they've not been able to spend in a similar way to there is, I assume, at Newcastle United. But Villa feel like they're in a more solid place, I think, than Newcastle in terms of where they're at and players not trying to kick down the door to leave, which is usually a good sign.
Yeah, I think there's at least a consistency about them that might be more trustworthy. I think heavily reliant in terms of success on how well Watkins and Morgan Rogers do for them. Obviously, both have been looked at by other teams in this transfer window, but the fact that they're managing to hold on to both of those players, it seems, is going to be important. And around them, it's a very solid team. Obviously, like anytime we make judgments on a club, we want to see improvements. We want to see real reasoning as to why we should expect the bar to be raised for the following season. Aston Villa finished 6th last year and haven't seen that movement in the transfer market. That makes me believe that they do go on to elevate themselves to 5th. So I think they'll be fine. I think they'll have a good season. I think they'll be a very good team. Do I think they'll finish 5th? Not really. I don't think that's where I'm going to be.
Okay. All right. In which case, who do you think is going to finish 5th?
Man United.
Why?
They have to, mate. That's part of the reason. They have to.
That's not a reason, and
it is a reason, because if you're watching what they're doing right now, I don't know how evident it is to the outside world of what's happened here, but Man United completely changed their transfer plans for this summer. It wasn't that long ago that we were hearing like, oh, Man United might take advantage of like Liam Delap's clause. They might go for Hayden Hackney.
Where we were being told that Manchester United were one transfer window from going under. So there's a real change of strategy, or that was just an excuse to fire all the dinner ladies.
It's a complete change of structure, and it's the reason behind it is because Ruben Amorim has gone to the club and he's been like, we are miles off it. We have to show huge ambition and we need to do it quickly, or we're going to be miles off. We're going to be even further off. I mean, you can't get much further off. They were 15th last season. Any further off that and you're basically going down. But he had to hammer home his own message to them that like radical change was needed and that they have to just push the boat out. Now, I've literally written a story today about Carlos Baleba and United's interest in him, and that United will basically blow the budget to get him if they have to. It seems to me they're completely abandoning now all the sensible things they were saying, because they realise that actually, if they don't go and do something major right now, then they're not getting back into this conversation again. They've said last season, Barada's literally put a date on it, 2028. Man United are winning the league again by 2028. Well, then that's got to start now. And that's why they've got Cunha and Burmo, Sesko. They've got an entirely different attack coming there for a lot of money. And now suddenly they're going for Baleba, who's a £100 million signing. And I'm being told they can actually find a way to do it, right? And they'll probably sign a goalkeeper. They probably will do it. Like, we're being told, well, it's impossible. But then some other people are telling me they'll find a way to. If they can get. It's difficult because Onana's there still. They're trying to get Onana to leave, even if he's on loan, just to open up the squad a bit. And then, I don't know, get Donnarumma on loan. Man City are in talks with him right now too. But the Baleba thing shows you how desperate Man United are to get back into those Champions League places, right? Because that definitely was not the level of spending we were looking at to fix that midfield. But you've said it before. You thought that they were more in need of a midfielder than they were of Šeško. Well, what are you going to say if they line up in a couple of weeks' time and they've got Šeško, but they've also got Baleba back there, who is actually perfect for what Amorim wants?
Yeah, if they go and sign Carlos Baleba, then I am willing to entertain the idea of Manchester United being in the conversation. Until Manchester United sign a central midfielder, I have them 8th, 9th. Like, that's where they're at. Like, it just, like, the system doesn't work unless you have that player who is capable of doing it. I honestly, I'm a bit confused as to what it means for Bruno, because I don't think that he necessarily works in the two. I think he works further up, but they've brought 2 players in to play in those roles. They've obviously brought a brand new front 3. What's that's going to look like? Is Bruno going to play further up? Is he going to play deeper? I think if you have a Baleba, it makes things a little bit easier in terms of working it out. But until they get that signing through the door, like, I'm just refusing to entertain it. Because I don't think that Manchester United have the capability right now to play in the style that Amorim wants. They've got better this year, which is why I think they move up the table. They've got better in those forward areas. But, like, until they fix the gaping hole in the middle of the park. And look, if they do, then it's a different conversation, right?
They're going to, mate. This is kind of what I'm trying to say here. Like, they are going to. Like, that's been decided. They're going to fix this hole. Now, I'm trying to word this carefully because I don't know when people are listening exactly, but, like, the offer's going to go in by the weekend. Most likely. Like, I've spoken to someone about this yesterday, and they're trying to be coy about it, but reading between the lines, Man United are going to make a proposal to Brighton to sign Baleba, and that first proposal might not even be dressed up as a formal offer, to be honest. But it will give them an understanding of what they need to do to sign him, and they're going to do everything they possibly can to make it happen. If they don't get Baleba, then he's going to join Man City or Liverpool next year.
Yeah,
this is their opportunity. This is their opportunity, and they know that. But they also know that by making contact with Brighton 10 days ago, whatever it was, a week ago, they know his head's turned. They know he wants to join them right now. And so I'm putting them 5th here because it's a little bit insider info that I'm relying on. But what I'm hearing suggests that, like, they have been convinced to just do what Amorim wants. And that is to go big. It's go big or go home. And I mean, go home is Amorim who's going home, because he ain't going to last the season if they don't do this. And he's like, he said this week or last week, I want to be here for 20 years. Like, without Baleba, he won't be there for 20 games. Because the gap is too big.
Without a central midfielder, but yeah, I think Baleba.
Yeah, a player of that, a player of that level and of that energy, and that ticks all the boxes that he does. So, yeah, I mean, they're obviously going to move upwards in the table from 15th. And I agree with you. Like, if they don't sign a midfielder, then 8th or 9th is where they will be. But I just think that they will sign a midfielder, and that changes so much about the way that the team functions. And they've actually got a goal scorer now in Šeško. Like, I don't know that he's the perfect one, but he's way better than what they had last season. And Burmo and Cunha add way more creativity and goal threat than what they had before. Plus, they've still got players like Diallo and Bruno and Xerxes who can come in and compete for places, and Kobbie Mainoo's there trying to be fitter and more determined than ever before. And they haven't got European football to contend with. So Amorim can manage the squad and doesn't need huge numbers to do that. So this is such an important season for Man United that they cannot afford to finish much lower than 5th, to be honest. So I'm going for it. I'm going to say that Man United finished 5th ahead of Newcastle and Villa.
So, look, like, I completely appreciate. I think United will get better, and I think they're there. And I think that if they do sign a central midfielder, it changes the conversation somewhat. I do still think there's a lot of gambles that have gone on here, right? And there's a lot of things that need to come off in a way that other teams have taken less kind of gambles across it all. They need that centre midfielder to be able to basically do the work of 2 players in order to cover if they're going to play Bruno in that deeper role, right? Fine. They've signed 2 of the Premier League's biggest XG overperformers in Mbeumo and Cunha, right? Appreciated that, Cunha has a track record of doing this, so there's less kind of risk associated with that one. But in Šeško, they've overpaid for an elite athlete who has a low level of production. Sound familiar? Because that's exactly what they did with Rasmus Højlund, an elite athlete who had underperformed in terms of his output. That's exactly what they're doing with Šeško. Now, I think that physically, he's a better player in terms of what he's bringing to the table because more rounded from a physicality perspective. But the gamble remains the same. I think he'll be fine, but I don't think he's going to be a world beater this season. He might end up being one in in a couple of years, but I don't think he's there yet. And so you're still looking at this and thinking, all right, this could go right. I agree with you. And especially if they do bring in that piece in the middle of the park to kind of knit it all together, this could work quite nicely. But I still think there's more gambles here than almost anyone else is taking. And that's risky, especially if you're a club trying to claw yourself back from the brink. And so the team I have in fifth, the Brighton, like that's where I have it. Because you look at what Brighton did last year and they were a little bit up and down, Hertzler's first season in it, but they trended in the right way. They worked out their defensive deficiencies and they started to concede fewer goals and become a kind of better team across it. They got some freak results like that random 7-0 loss to Nottingham Forest where Hertzler basically tried to play 4 attacking midfielders and left Jack Hinchelwood like Jon Snow against the entire rampaging Bolton army with one sword. And he was overrun, unsurprisingly. I think Hertzler would have learned. I think that obviously João Pedro has left, and that's a big one in terms of who's gone out. Obviously, they also lose Estupiñán, who's been excellent for them over the last few years. Evan Ferguson goes out on loan, but he was out of the picture last season anyway. And then Dingra, who didn't really suit what Hertzler was trying to do. They bring in Maxim de Kuyper, which I think is a really smart left-back addition to replace Estupiñán. They strengthen in central defence in Coppola, who's coming from Hellas Verona, and Olivier Bascagli, who comes in to provide a little bit of experience from the Eredivisie, and he can play in a couple of different positions. Kostoulas, I think, is a really interesting replacement as João Pedro, kind of an attacking midfielder that can play a little bit further up, maybe as a shadow striker. We'll see how that looks. Like, I look at their business and I think, yeah, sensible. Everything you've done there it makes sense from a kind of perspective of what you're trying to do and what this new coach is trying to do. I think he will have learned a lot of lessons from last year, and they don't have European football to contend with. So you can't even level that against them in the same way that you could against like a Forest ahead of Man United or a Tottenham ahead of Manchester United. Brighton don't have that to contend with. I think they're going to be a force this season. I really do. I've got a really good feeling about this Brighton team.
Yeah, look, they're going to be good. Whether they're good enough, I honestly don't know. I'm not as hot on them as everyone else is. Maybe I'm just lacking awareness of like key positions. But what if they do lose Baleba? I know they've got a deep, deep squad, but that would be quite significant. Like, no wonder they're putting such a big price on him, because losing a player who was potentially their best player at this stage of his summer would be, it would certainly mess things up in terms of planning for the season. That's another reason. Look, what I keep talking about Baleba right now, like Brighton don't want to lose him, right? That's why they're putting such a big price on him. But ultimately, if they could get £100 million for Carlos Baleba, I find it hard to believe it won't happen. You've got to be so firm on your stance. But I can also see it from the flip. They say, well, we're not going to let him go because we believe we're going to finish above Man United next season. We are going to finish fifth and might even get fourth because we're that good. So actually, I think that a lot does weigh on the outcome of this battle once it properly opens up. If it does, like, I might be wrong. My info might be wrong. But if it does open up and United do go aggressive on trying to get Baleba, maybe it changes things a bit. And also, I do wonder a little bit about the loss of João Pedro. Like, I'm not saying that João Pedro is like a world beater that's irreplaceable, but I did find him to be an extremely important member of what I was watching last season.
Yeah, I just think Kostoulas is going to fit like a glove in terms of that hole. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how he gets on. But, Baleba will be a big loss. Equally, you look at it, Matt Svifa came in last year, wasn't completely brilliant, but I think grew into it. We saw Brian Gruder grow into it. We saw Yasin Ayari grow into it. Matt O'Reilly, I think, will have a better season this year. There is depth there from a Brighton perspective.
They've got depth for sure, like across in terms of that entire squad, they've probably got more than anyone. Yeah. Like potentially, like their squad is very deep.
Does Yalkuye come back in now after that loan at Sturm Graz where he did pretty well? Like I don't know. Like as in all of these things are completely up in the air. 19 years old. I'm not expecting him to immediately step in and be the world's best player. But they bought him for a reason when they signed him from Göteborg, a couple of years ago, and then he went out on loan. But he's someone that they clearly see as someone who's got the potential to go and light up again. So we'll see. I mean, we should probably quickly talk about Tottenham before we, call this segment to a halt, because it's been a strange summer. Obviously, Thomas Frank comes in as the manager. They get some early business done in that they bring in Mohamed Kudus, and then Joao Palhinha comes in a little bit later. Suddenly you look at it and saying, okay, where are Spurs? But Son leaves, and Maddison's injured, and Kulusevski's injured. Now the links to Eze have heated up. The Savinho links have heated up again. It's like, okay, Spurs are putting their foot on the pedal again after being rocked a little bit, I think, by whatever happened with Morgan Gibbs-White.
Yeah, I mean, the big question is, they've got a new coach in here, and has Thomas Frank got the pieces in place early enough for him to succeed? At the moment, he hasn't. And obviously, we're recording this before the Super Cup final, to be honest. So if you're listening to this and Tottenham have just beaten PSG 3-0, then fine. But at the moment, he's not really got a squad that's better than what he was working with at Brentford. And obviously, I've mentioned before that one of my hot takes was that Tottenham finished 10th, the same position as he finished last season with Brentford. There's a level of expectation here that Thomas Frank's got to deal with, but he's also kind of been promised the world in terms of what Tottenham are willing to go and spend in order to build on the momentum of winning a trophy. So I do want to see him back that up. And obviously, the Savinho and Eze pursuit is exciting, and it's definitely got genuine intent. So they've been trying to close that down to see if they can get those players in. But that's also, it's going to be big investment to get both of those players, which is ideally what they would look for with it. They've lost Son, who was on the wane, but he was a driving force. He was a talisman of the team. Obviously, James Maddison is also a real character in the side and is not going to be there. So I do think they're both losses. Joao Palhinha, obviously, I'll always say is a great signing because of what I've seen him do before. But at the moment, I don't have enough reason to believe in a big uplift from Tottenham in terms of a league sense. They're definitely going to be an uplift, and they'll definitely be 10th or above. But until I know exactly where they lie in terms of getting Thomas Frank a team that reflects what he needs, I'm kind of stuck. Now, I know Man United have just said, they're going to finish 5th because I believe they're signing this player. So let's say I believe that Eze and Savinho do sign. I think that definitely changes things. I don't know still that I'd put them 5th. I think I'd have them still a little short of it, but it would go some way to making up for it. Honestly, like Solanke concerns me a little bit in terms of whether he's going to be available enough and whether they score enough goals through the striker, because he hasn't got proper backup. And like Richarlison's still there, but
Yeah, Matthias Tel can play through the middle as well, right?
But not convinced by him yet.
Yeah, I mean, look, I was talking to Danny Kelly earlier, obviously of Trans Euro Express fame, and he was saying, I can't remember a time, he's been a Spurs fan for 60 odd years, right? He was like, I can't remember a time in my lifetime where Spurs' best players were all defenders. And you look at it now and you look at Vicario in goal, you look at the back four, if it's fully fit, which I appreciate doesn't always happen, but Pedro Porro of Christian Romero, Mickey van der Ven, Destiny Udogie, and Joao Palhinha in front of them, you're like, that's a pretty solid back six, actually. That's a pretty good. And if Thomas Frank is going to be more pragmatic, maybe we see a slightly different side to Spurs where they grind out 1-0 and we see, Spurs kind of playing in a different way. But at the moment, I think the lack of creativity in those final thirds feels a little bit all over the place, and they're going to have to address that before anything kind of gets properly.
Do you think Tottenham, let's take the squads as they are to be in fairness, for what Tottenham have right now on the back of winning the Europa League, on the back of what Man United and Aston Villa and Newcastle have right now, where do you think Tottenham sit among those?
Above United as they stand right now, but that midfielder does change things because I think Spurs will actually be quite hard to break down with that back six. But I would probably have them below Villa. I'd probably have Spurs and Newcastle on a relative par. Villa ahead of both of all of them, I think, at this point. And then United at the bottom of that pack. But one signing does really change that, I think.
Yeah, fair.
I think that's probably where I have it. And with that, we're going to call this version of the podcast.
Poor Nottingham Forest, mate. You didn't even mention him. Poor Forest.
We're going to have to push Forest into tomorrow's podcast. We'll talk about the disruptors. Look, I know that we've fallen into the old trap, but we'll put Forest in that disruptor category with Fulham and Bournemouth and all of those teams in there when we discuss it. Which of these teams can kick upwards? So that will be all in part 2 of the podcast, which is coming later in the week. For now, what's left for me to do is say thank you very much to Mr. Dean Jones.
Cheers, mate.
I'm Jack Collins. This has been Ranks FC. Thank you so much for listening as ever. As we say, we will be back later in the week with part 2 of this Premier League preview, where we talk about all of the rest of the 11 teams we haven't got to, talk about the relegation battle and those mid-table teams looking to kick upwards and onwards this season. But thank you so much for sticking with us as ever. We hope you're looking forward to the return of the Premier League, and we'll see you very shortly, Rank Squad. Take it easy. Peace.